figure out how to share this link. Share, copy link. There we go. Let's see here. We'll throw this up there. Send it also to Discord. Do I live under a subway? I'm actually not at home right now. I'm at my church, and yes, my church is right next to the train tracks right there. Is it loud? Because I can always move to a different room. I could always also mute my mic when I think the train is coming. How's it going, Luke?
What up, Moises?
How are you?
Doing well. This is what I used to do all the time in Discord chats. I come in here when I'm working out on the elliptical.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to get myself to work out at some point again.
Chad just got an elliptical. Chad, get in here. I'll show you what's up. Show you how it's done.
You know, I actually, maybe 3 weeks ago, I went to a local gym and jumped on an elliptical for the first time in my life.
Yeah? What do you think?
I liked it. Well, I did the elliptical because normally I would have tried to do the treadmill.
Yeah.
I had a broken toe from a karate tournament.
Oh, dang.
I couldn't run on that foot, but the elliptical was perfect.
So you're like Mark Driscoll. If somebody tries to rush the stage, you can kick them in the face.
Well, I'm still early on in my karate training. I'm only a green belt.
Okay.
But I'd like to think I can handle myself pretty well.
I never know. All the belts are different in all the different disciplines. So I have one of my daughters does jiu-jitsu, but I know it's different than karate. So.
Yeah. So I'm basically on the 4th belt.
Okay.
4th out of, I think black belt would be the 11th.
Oh, okay. So that's pretty decent.
Yeah, I've been doing it about a little over a year.
Nice. When I was in 6th grade, I took Taekwondo for about a month. Okay. White belt 1 stripe right here myself, sir. So you might be able to take me.
Well, my class right now is mostly kids, so I kind of feel like Kramer. But I do it with my kids, my daughter and my son.
Okay, nice. Well, that's good. I kind of thought about doing that. I want to get my son in jiu-jitsu too, and I thought about doing it myself just because I grew up wrestling.
Okay, yeah, I wrestled in high school.
Oh, nice. I did when I was younger. I didn't in high school, but it's I love it, and I'm glad that I did it. It's like I hated it at the time, but it's one of those things that, man, in retrospect, I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and it's good, so especially for my son. You know, my kids are kind of like overachievers.
Okay.
And so they're pretty successful at most of what they do.
Geez, can our kids hang out? Are they similar ages to motivate my children?
My son is 8 and my daughter's 10.
Okay. I have a 10-year-old daughter, or 11, I guess. Close. So.
Yeah, and so trying to find ways for them to learn how to deal with disappointment is tricky.
Yeah. Isn't it for all of us, huh?
But so far, it's worked out well because both of them struggle with coordination.
Okay.
And so my son, when he started karate, was terrible.
Okay.
But after a year, he's improved a lot. But sometimes not as much as he would like. And
Yeah.
so, like when we put him in a tournament, and actually he kind of did better than most of the other kids in the area that he was competing.
Yeah.
But he ended up coming in third place, which was kind of disappointing, especially because I feel like he actually I think he did better than some of the other kids, and our sensei kind of agreed.
So it wasn't like sparring matches. It was just kind of judging.
Yeah, I was judging based on how he did what's called the kata.
Okay.
But he came in third place and was actually good because then he's like, okay, that means I'll have to work harder next time if I want to try to.
Nice. Yeah, that's good.
I'm like, okay, good, because I don't know how to. It's tricky because I grew up in a very poor, where like disappointment was regular for me growing up.
Yeah.
And now we live in a poor neighborhood still. We're still, I guess, relatively poor, but we have access to a lot more than I ever had as a kid.
Right.
And so how do I don't know how to always navigate that with my kids.
Yeah, it's like that. Rogan talks about all the time. It makes me think of that Sebastian Younger quote from like Hard Times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times.
Yeah. And so it's like, I don't want to give my kids too easy of a time, but I also don't want to be a dick to them.
Totally. That summarizes a lot of my parenting right there.
Yeah, always straddling that fence.
Yes, it's tough. And then it's part of what's given me a little peace about it and a little grace for myself. So I'm pretty judgmental of myself, right? It's theoretical grace. I'm not the best at applying it, but it's just the idea that like my dad was kind of a hard guy. I mean, I've often described him as like, he's Western South Dakota cowboy, gruff. Like he used to be an iron worker. Like he's one of those, he's almost kind of like mythic. And to this day, I've never, like, it's kind of you know who David Goggins is?
Yep.
So he's like, Rogan calls him like, extraordinary men among extraordinary men.
Yeah.
My old man's kind of like that when it comes to work or fearlessness or anything. Like he's 73 and he was just like doing something on my parents' roof, and he stepped on a piece of plywood that he thought he had nailed down. And so it just went shh, and he just like hit the ground on concrete and they found out he broke 3 ribs, but before he went to the hospital and before he let my sister-in-law call my mom, he climbed back up on the roof and like finished the job because it was going to rain.
Yeah, it's pretty hardcore.
He's just such a baller, and that's him at like 73. So imagine him at 30. I mean, he was just, I mean, I'll spare you the stories, but all that to circle back to what I was going to say. I start saying something and I tell stories, but he was a hard guy in a lot of ways, but I've benefited from that in a lot of ways. And as I've grown up, I've realized that I'm a pretty emotional, introspective person. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've said that my dad saved me from was a lot of anxiety and fear, because I was so terrified of him that like I couldn't be scared of anything else.
Yeah.
Like he was like the bad guy for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Peterson always brings that up, like as his way of life, is that he's more terrified if God is like of a higher power and of being dishonest than he is of anything else in the world.
Yeah. But the thing is like, but my dad was good.
Yeah.
He's just imperfect and just gruff.
Yeah. My dad was similar. So, in my extended family on my mom's side, there's a lot of single moms. And my mom has 7 sisters. And so my dad was kind of the disciplinarian for everybody. He'd hit anybody's kids.
Yep.
And so that was always the threat. If you're bad, we'll call Theo Louis. He'll come and take care of business. But yeah, I was always terrified of the anger of my father.
Yeah.
But I always knew my father loved me very much.
Yes. And sometimes I feel like our culture misses that. I mean, there's been a bit of a, I don't know, emasculation of men in our society, and we've become so, we're so afraid of the patriarchy or, malevolent masculinity, toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
that we talk about this a lot, but I don't know, because I often feel that way. Like I have to be bad cop. I need to be like I have to be the guy in my family. I often feel this way. That's like saying no. Somebody has to say no.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we just give into this tide of, expediency and the path of least resistance.
Yeah. Well, and I find that it's like there's a dichotomy here between me and my wife that initially she was very much kind of resented. There's the train. But like I spank my kids. Well, I can't remember the last time I had to spank my kids. It's an option.
Yeah.
My wife was against it in the beginning, but my wife has spanked my kids. But the difference is my wife has spanked the kids when she's fed up and loses her temper.
Okay.
I spanked my kids
when she snaps.
Yeah. And even if I yell at my kids, it's usually when they're doing something.
Yeah.
But I don't lose my temper with my kids.
Yeah.
Like if I yell at them, it looks like I'm losing my temper. But the moment they're in compliance, I turn it off because goal achieved. My wife, when she loses her temper, like when she yells at the kids, even if they comply, she doesn't turn it off right away because she's angry.
Yeah.
And so then they've learned that even if I listen to her, she's still going to be angry. So why listen to her?
Right. No. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of are you familiar? So the Tripp brothers, Ted and Paul Tripp, they wrote a book called, well, one of their books is Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands, but they wrote a book called Shepherding a Child's Heart. I don't know. I figured.
I'm familiar with Paul Tripp, but I haven't read the book.
So whatever. These are my historical roots here. And I remember they have a book on, I don't know, they mentioned some books in there. I mean, there's some really nasty parenting books out there that are like pretty rough, but they kind of advocate spanking, but they were saying in it, essentially, I mean, it's been a long time since I've read it, but they say that, essentially you're always teaching your children. No matter what you do, you're teaching your children. And so, like with spanking, I've kind of come, are you familiar with spiral dynamics? You know what that is?
I don't.
So like, we were talking about this last night. I went out with some local estuary guys, and one of those guys, Dan, shout out Dan, if you watch this, he probably won't. He's not a super little quarter person. But so spiral dynamics is Ken Wilber. He was on Rebel Wisdom a few times, and Richard Rohr talks about it a lot. So if that automatically discredits it in your mind, I'm sorry. But it's this theory. It's a really ancient theory of kind of both societal and personal evolution. And essentially it's like a spiral. So it's like there are all these different modes. Like if you have a computer, you could pull up an image, but there are all these different modes of, let's say, consciousness, essentially. And the theory is that individuals and societies kind of travel through these. And so and they're color coordinated in order to kind of eliminate, a better, worse than hierarchy type of a thing.
Yeah.
But the idea is that on one level, they're circular, but then on another level, there's a telodic orientation to them, like it's going somewhere, circling a mystical center.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite models in general. And to say all that is like, I'm using this to get back to parenting. There's all these different modes like that I've gone through in my life. Tim Keller said once, and I just heard Jacob quote this the other day, which I wonder if he like got from me quoting Tim Keller a while ago. But Tim Keller used to say, I look back at my life when I was 20, and he's like, when I was 30, I thought, I was an idiot at 20. When I was 40, I thought I was an idiot at 30. And when I was 50, and then he gets to 60, and he's like, I'm sure I'll feel that way when I'm 70. But that's just another way of saying, like, it's a spiral dynamic. And so
you're at the same spot, just a little bit higher.
Right. And so I've had a lot of those experiences in my life. So like spanking kids, corporal punishment. I don't know, I definitely grew up with it. And at the beginning of my parenting, I would have said that I was in more of kind of a authoritarian fundamentalist church
Mhm.
when I was a young parent, and and they definitely advocate for spanking. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. Like I've heard John Piper say, what is more destructive to a child? Like in love, if you do it as best as you can, best case scenario, you spank a kid and then reconcile, and like there's punishment, or you like give them the silent treatment and emotionally abuse them for a couple hours or days and send them to their room and isolate them.
Yeah.
Like what is more destructive
Mm-hmm.
to a kid? And so it's kind of like, I don't know. We spanked our kids when we were young. We moved away from it for a long time. And I mean, and then they basically gotten older. We're like, don't spank them.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. It's kind of back to my dad thing. I have different ways of looking at it. Like, was the kind of fear that my dad instigated in me worse than kind of, I don't know, some kind of emotional abuse and anxiety he could have done by being passive aggressive and indirect and
yeah. Well, I mean,
whatever.
we get this from the Bible, right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Right.
That fear of the thing that loves you the most, that holy fear, that reverence, will protect you from lots of other things.
Right. We're like, of course, he's not safe, but he's good.
Yes, because you can trust that when he's being aggressive in certain ways, there's a certain knowledge and wisdom that he has that we do not.
Right.
I remember, so my father married my mom. She had 3 kids already. So I have my 3 oldest siblings have different biological fathers. And so my mom really didn't like my father's temper or way of disciplining kids. And she said one time when the kids were little, they weren't married very long, middle of the night, my mom packed up the kids and said, okay, we're leaving. Because my dad had hit my brother and sister or something like that.
Yep.
And my brother, so Ma, go back to bed. And she's like, but no, we can't tolerate him hitting you like that. And she's like, Ma, I was bad. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And so my mom stayed. My parents have been married over 41 years now.
Okay.
But a big part of that was that a lot of times kids know, and then with the spanking, it's over like that. And especially young kids don't have their frontal lobe formed, so they're not always holding on to that in the same way, like, especially if there's reconciliation after the fact.
Yeah, I would say if you do it in like steel manning, whatever, the best possible way, like you're not angry, you're not doing it in some kind of vindictive, venting, frustrated way. It's kind of I don't know. This is where I'm kind of it gets into my philosophical radical personalism is you can be right and be wrong or be wrong and be right. Like in theory, I may, not advocate or prescribe corporal punishment, but like, is someone who uses corporal punishment in the best possible way better than someone who theoretically and abstractly and conceptually is opposed to it?
Yeah.
But yet does that in the worst possible way? Well, which is better,
Well, it's almost like, and it's funny because I've been, since a lot of the conversations, especially with Sam or around Sam, have been about the Trinitarian. So you have this idealistic aspect of discipline, punishment, but it has to be negotiated with the embodied punishment, right? If you have this idea of corporal punishment is wrong, sure, that's fine. But if you're doing the other kind of discipline poorly, you're still in a bad place. Or if you have this ideological of corporal punishment, but you're able to find a way to practically embody that in a way that's very functional and not abusive, there has to be a unity there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's essentially, I would say that's essentially kind of Vervaeke's adverbial is like where those two things meet, the, mind, body, transcendent, immanent idea, lived reality. If that is mediated in love, it's fine.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I see in that how Bishop Robert Barron describes the Trinity. So you have the lover, which would be the idea of disciplining my children. You have the loved, or the embodiment of that, which would be, akin to Jesus Christ, but that would be the actual disciplining, how that actually happens. And
Yeah.
then when they work well together, there is this ethos, spirit of discipline that is created, which would be that Holy Spirit with
Yeah.
love between them. And there you have your conceptualization of the Trinity.
Yeah. Or one of them for sure. Yeah, you could think of it that way. I mean, I think God is like, God almost is pure potency, or like the singularity,
Yeah.
or the ground of being, the nothingness before the everythingness. And then what becomes of that is the act, it's I don't know, I've been talking about that recently with friends, and because this Sunday or last Sunday in the Orthodox Church we were commemorating St. Gregory Palamas. So the sermon and everything, we were talking about energy essences, and to be, I guess, is like, he's a saint of the church, and that's that's it's a pretty clear, although I don't know to what degree settled. I don't know how anything is like, nothing is truly settled, really, at least in my understanding in Orthodoxy, the way that it is in Catholicism. Like, it's just different, but it's kind of like the Neo-Chalcedonian movement. It's like, yeah, Chalcedon said this, but we're still like working out what that means.
Yeah.
It's like even energy essence stuff, and I've had endless conversations with Sam about this, because since I've met Sam, this is the kind of irony and a lot of the sadness that I personally feel, because I feel sadness for Sam. Obviously, I've had similar situations, and I think the whole thing is just, on one level, really frustrating and makes me mad, and I think it's dumb. But then also personally, like, I just know with the diversity of thought between Sam and I, like, I've learned more about the Trinity, at least theologically, from the few years I've known Sam than I've known my whole life. And so I'm just like, I don't know. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think of it as this whole idea of iron sharpening iron, right? It's that you need that diversity of perspectives. As long as there's some kind of unifying force.
Yes, but what is that unity, right?
Yeah, and that's what we're all trying to figure out, I suspect.
Because I've argued from the beginning that unity can't be creedal. Because then you will systemically preclude the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, even Sam will say he'll say the Apostles' Creed.
Right. And Sam, the interesting thing is Sam and I disagree on this. But I just think, I'm just like, Sam, you're experiencing what I'm talking about.
Well, and I've actually talked to Sam about this a little bit too, and I don't want to speak for Sam, but
Sam, get in here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I told him is that I think there are certain aspects of like being Unitarian that is about holding on to being Unitarian. Because again, I've heard Sam describe what he thinks of each of these essences. And to me, I'm like, I've heard people that say that that's an adequate description of what the Trinity is. And so there's actually agreement here. It's just that you're calling it something different. And so it seems to me a lot of times the problem is more in the words than in what we're trying to understand.
Well, and this is what's so weird is because, like, honestly, like I could talk to a Orthodox or an Oriental Orthodox, a Nestorian, like a Kabbalistic Jew, a Sufi Muslim, and truly, or Raj, and I could talk to any of those people, and there's probably more overlap theologically, like core ontology, than I have with like egalitarian Trinitarianism. So like somebody that's in the fold, at least confessionally, within that is thought of broadly as being Christian. They self-identify as Christian. They're not considered heretics necessarily. But like that's way further than my understanding of God.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes, and this gets into a lot of the idea of like propositional belief, because sometimes we do have similar propositional beliefs that we just articulate differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that gets really, really tricky. I mean, this is, I don't know if you ever talked with CW about the idea of like the church being a bit larger than the institutions that are that church. And so creeds and confessions are useful, but like any tool, they can be used inappropriately.
Right. That's like George Box is this statistician. This is one in my quote repository that I love to pull up. But all models are false. Some are useful.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's exactly. I think that's it's basically what you're saying. It's like, but I think So this is what I would say though. A creed is a model.
Mm-hmm.
So all creeds are false. Some are useful. Because it's like writing on water. Anytime you bring the transcendent down,
Mm-hmm.
and here's even the irony. I think this is part of the postmodern point. Is words are polysemous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have many meanings, and a lot of the meanings depends on the context. So I was just saying this to some friends recently. It's kind of like deep calls to deep. In order for me and you to communicate, we have to have some matrix that allows the communication.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of similar patterns. We're both creatures. We're both human. We both speak English. We're both like, whatever, the nested eggs. Put as many similarities as we have that allow for communication. But this is a weird thing about humanity, is like, you can get that as intimate as you possibly want,
Mm-hmm.
like down to mother, father, spouse, kids, and there's still like infinite difference. Because, as Peugeot said a long time ago, the expression of the infinite is also infinite. So anytime you think you're bringing that infinity down into a static model, like a definition of a word, good luck, because that definition is related to everything it's embedded in, which is what it means to be polysemous.
Yeah, it's interesting that Nathan Woods makes this comment, which I knew somebody was going to say. The creed isn't false.
Luther, do you think I'm a Viking?
But I think it really it goes back to even what we're talking about. Well, what do you mean by false?
Right. I would say this is an illustration of what I'm talking about. Like, I agree with you and I don't.
Yeah, because it's like, to a certain degree, what I think how I would say it, because again, I'm trying to articulate in a way that's useful, is that it is not absolutely true and not absolutely false.
It isn't a static perfection that doesn't include opening.
Yeah, because to a certain degree, it also depends on interpretation. It's trying to communicate a truth,
Yes.
but the creeds are limited by language.
Yes, and I would say the nature, I mean, I don't know. I say some of this stuff and I'm like, I don't know to what level it's useful to most people. But like, the nature of perception involves the seer. This is like the double slit experiment. There is no reality without a perceiver. Like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. You say that to a modernist or to a materialist, and I think a lot of Christians are really materialists with just a layered on, theoretical Sunday school, like spiritualism.
Yeah.
But they're really materialists. But what that means, if you're not a materialist, is that in order to perceive something, in order for there to be perception, there needs to be a perceiver. And what that entails, I would say, is that reality doesn't exist without a perceiver.
Well, and then I would go on further to say you need a perceiver and you need something to be perceived. You actually need both. And so the idea of like materialism, I might venture to say that everybody's a materialist, just not an absolute materialist.
Well, I don't know that there's something. I think there's a communicator and a communicatee, or there's like I see everything as relationship. So I don't like. That's probably this is why I get into relational ontology. I don't think there are static things. Like, I don't think there's anything that's just there to be perceived. I don't believe in substance ontology. Like, to me, that's just like materialism.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is I think I'm against absolute materialism, like where materialism is the highest form.
Yeah.
But materialism, it's a valid tool. I like a lot of what we're saying. There's validity in it, but it cannot be God.
Yes, it's just I used to push Paul on this all the time. He brought up recently, but this is why I'm adamant kind of about panentheism, is that in him we live and move or have our being. So like, not only us humans, but like what we think of as an object, like a rock. Anything you could perceive does not have a deity. It doesn't have self-existence.
Mm-hmm.
It has existence in its relationship to God. Like the end. Otherwise, I think you fall into substance ontology, which I think is absurd. But
Yeah.
what are comments? This is all
So some of the comment Nathan is always throwing you.
Luke here.
You're a Viking now. One of the funniest ones that I saw was Grim.
Grim.
What did he say? Because he has his own thing, competing stream right now, competing in a time slot, but then using you as a sex object is crossing a line.
Grim also, this is just arbitrary that I popped on with Moist Face. Grim has asked me many times to come on pop into his thing, but it just hasn't worked out. I'm not opposed to you, Grim. I love you.
Yeah, and I don't know where I don't know where he posts all this stuff. Does he have his own Discord server?
Yes, he does.
Okay. I don't think I'm connected with that. And he's not as active on Twitter anymore.
I mean, I don't know how one keeps up with all these. Like, throughout this whole time, the first Discord I was ever on was Bridges of Meaning. And then there was like, I don't know, I think throughout time, I've joined about 10 of them. I keep up with essentially none of them. It's just, there's too much stuff. Well, so I want your opinion about this. Did you see Paul's newest this morning?
I didn't. I have it saved, so watch it a little later.
Okay. So one of the questions I have for you, because he's talking about a conversation with Ken Lowry of climbing Mount Sophia, no longer climbing on Mount Sophia, rebranded. And he recently had on DC Schindler and Peugeot to have a conversation. And he's had on DC Schindler about 3 times, who's an academic who is he's always been kind of adjacent to this corner.
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking about, because he's kind of a beauty first person. He's kind of a von Balthasar expert. So he talks about things in a way that a lot of us have been interested in a long time. My friend Michael Lady was reading him a long time ago, Karen Wong. I think Karen's had him on once or twice.
Okay.
Anyhow, PVK did a little commentary on it. But in that, one of the things that he said is this little corner is somewhat starting to blossom and get some adjacent bigwigs, some academics, some people with some status. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to get, we have Vervaeke, we have Peugeot, PVK has his own status, but now we're getting like some people starting to talk, like DC Schindler and then Jordan Daniel Wood and some of the conversations Grail Country's having. Chris Green, who's great. And then Paul was saying, and this is a conversation that's very in line with Jacob and the organization and all that. PVK's asking, how do we scale? And now, people know a lot of my cards is the cliff notes is I'm doubtful that the good scales. I just don't think it does because of human limitation.
Yeah.
Because I think everything is fundamentally personal. And 1 Corinthians 8 is like my proper knowing is knowing as you are known. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you do that at scale. Yep. It requires intimacy. It requires embodiment. It requires time. It requires attention. And you can't pay attention to everything. And so you can't, so to some degree, your person, who you really are, the multiplicity of who you are can't scale. You can really thin that out and push it through technology, but it's a thin version of you. Mm-hmm. I call that like de-spirited breath, actually. It's the same, like Socrates said, writing will make us forget. Like Socrates had this lament against writing. And I think part of that is because in that technology, part of the person is lost. You don't see their face, you don't hear their voice, it's a lessened version of whatever they're trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. It's a difference between that and oral tradition. But now with YouTube, we've kind of brought some of this back, right?
Yeah.
I'm hearing your voice. I'm seeing your face. So but yeah, I can't have I can't know you in the same way that I know, let's say, Sam or Sherry or Jeff or Joe or these people that I've known for 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, I can't know you the same way I know my wife. So, like, how do we scale true communion? I don't think we can.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, that's not my goal. There's two aspects to what I'm thinking. Is one is just providing a little bit more organization to streamline some things.
Okay.
For example, the just chatting stuff. This is kind of a place where, ideally, in the future, people can now, hey, I want to talk about some ideas.
Uh-huh.
Ideally, something like this would be going all the time.
Yeah.
So they know, hey, this is where I'm going to go to touch base with some people, like an online coffee shop almost.
Okay.
But then also, there's a few different kinds of people that jump into this little corner. There's some guys like me, and maybe you, maybe some other guys that have a decent family, people that like to have a good embodied social life. But then there's a lot of people that don't.
Right.
They're just watching this and wanting to find something like that. So then I want to figure out ways to figure out healthy transitions.
Yeah.
Between this
bridges.
online world. Yeah, exactly. The bridges of meaning. But an embodied bridge. To bridge people from the virtual world into a healthy embodied world.
Rather than further into the little corner or metaverse.
Exactly. And I don't want to necessarily draw people out of the embodied world into here.
Yeah, right.
There's already something established to draw people out of an unhealthy embodied world here.
Right.
And I want to create a pathway back out of here, maybe not completely out, but towards a healthy embodied world again.
Yeah. No, and I get that. It's kind of like, it's don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, or just because the online isn't ideal doesn't mean it's not, necessary or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I get that. I mean, you could almost, this is what popped up in my mind. See if you think it's similar. It's almost like the legalization of drugs. Because I'm for the eventual, I was talking to my son about this the other day. I mean, not surprising as an anarchist, but I'm for the legalization of drugs. However, I don't think, given our society the way that it is, and given our history, our embeddedness, where we're instantiated, do I think we should legalize drugs universally, globally, like now? No. I think that's crazy. Like, that obviously wouldn't be good. So it's like, if people, the parallel is like, this maybe isn't exactly the same, but like, if people are going to use drugs, they're going to use drugs. Like, that doesn't mean you should like inhibit their use of drugs. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing this analogy is poor. Let's scrap it.
Well, I mean, there are certain helpful things there, because what's a better barrier for drug use, or especially drug abuse? I would say that. What's the better barrier, a law or mom and dad?
Right.
And siblings, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is what happens whenever you become too dependent on maybe the state or a governing body to enforce things, is
or any structure.
Yeah, is that the pressure or the responsibility seems to be too easily let go by those who are probably better apt to walk others through that.
Right. In a personal way.
Yeah,
otherwise, it's just a rule.
Yeah, I mean, the best example of that is nursing homes. Oh, it's great to have a place where we can pay somebody to take care of our elderly.
Right.
But now nobody wants to take care of their elderly family. And then the excuse they'll give is, well, I'm not gifted in that way. You're
right. And also, it's way easier to just outsource anything that, isn't.
But then the moment that the system starts abusing that,
well,
I don't know what else to do. Well,
right.
It's your primary responsibility.
Well, and that's part of it, and then you lose the ability to even do it. It's kind of like,
exactly, yeah.
This is the danger of technology. Is like COVID, all the grocery stores shut down. Everybody's gonna starve. Nobody knows how to feed themselves.
Yeah.
Or like, we got iPhones with Google Maps, or phones with Google Maps. Nobody knows cardinal directions anymore. Nobody can find anything. Like, if they don't have a map that's working on their phone, they're lost.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you've lost your connection to. You've outsourced your agency.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because technology is supposed to enhance what you can already do, but we quickly become dependent on that and then lose what we could already do.
Yes, and I mean that's kind of been my Sherry pushes back on me on this, and my friend Michael Lady has pushed back on me on this. Is like I tend to be kind of an absolutist, idealistic Luddite, but as I speak to you on a cell phone, on an elliptical. But I mean, part of that is I'm married with children. Like I'd live in a yurt otherwise. But shoot, I distracted myself. What was I saying?
I don't remember.
Oh, all right. Well, is there anybody else? Why is no one else showing up? Because you don't have the kind of street cred that Federecci has.
Well, and Federecci always tells me I start too early, but
everyone. I mean, people are at work or like at work where they can just fake being at work on their computer.
Well, I actually have to run anyway. I just got a call from a client that I have to.
A client? Is this your bivocational thing? You don't call your flock clients, do you?
No. That would be interesting if I did. I might start that. No, I'm also a licensed realtor, so I do some real estate work.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's the way I try to build community by selling people homes around where I live, so that we can actually be physically together.
Dude, that's like my fantasy. I mean, I had a buddy at one point who really wanted to do that. Like his dream, me and him, and my wife was never into it. We wanted to like buy a condo or like in a condo building or apartment building or something and just have. I know people that do that. Like, I'm pretty sure you've ever heard the band The Lone Bellow.
I'm not familiar actually.
So like this is not necessarily your genre of music, but I imagine you're somewhat eclectic. They're really good.
Yeah.
But it's a group of people. Yeah, it's a group of people. Breaking news, it's a band. It's a group of people.
Yeah.
And but they have, I think they're still Christian, or they were Christian at some point, but they're a popular, semi-popular kind of indie folk rock band, and they have really great music. But they're from New York, and I think that's what they do. Like they all live in an apartment together. I'm a huge fan of voluntary communism, man.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that it works when it's volunteer. It's not when it's not so much when it's compelled.
Right. Yeah, when there's like an absolutist, statist, unbending structure that isn't rooted in personal voluntarism, it goes bad fast.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm gonna bolt. It was nice chatting, buddy.
All right. I'll be on again same time tomorrow.
Sweet. Peace.
Peace.